I would like to welcome everybody who was able to make it, and I'm sure there are many, many more of you coming. So today we're going to be talking to Pawel, and he's an interaction designer and creative technologist. He's also a lecturer at the Royal Academy of Art, which is in The Hague, and he also is a speaker. And he has two TED Talks which I've found, which were very fascinating, and we will link it later, so do look at it. Would you like to say something more? I also forgot to mention that since we're doing this with a collaboration with Open Elective, he was the instructor for this course, which was very ironically titled Artificial Stupidity and Machine Unlearning.
Yeah, it's a small provocation, and of course I was thinking of a catchy title. We are looking critically and conceptually at artificial intelligence and machine learning tools and practices, trying to propose a more, I would say, playful but also more discursive approach to these technologies in design. Think of the local context and ethics of AI. Therefore, my ironic title, because not all of the AI is actually intelligent, and not all of the machine learning is done well. So maybe we also need to propose certain practices of unlearning the machines in order to create a better solutions.
Yeah, definitely. So I would like to start with the question, what exactly is interaction design? I was listening to a podcast where you said that this is a term that you were not entirely comfortable with. So I would like to know, what can you tell us about how and if this term actually defines your practice, and when or why did you start referring to yourself as creative technologist, interaction designer?
Well, I studied interaction design. I did a bachelor and master degree here in the Netherlands, and obviously I'm an interaction designer, but I have a love-hate relationship to this discipline, because it's been called as a human-centered approach to technology, but it turned out over the years that it's also very corporate-oriented, corporate-centered practice.
Yeah.
Very commercially driven, and not critical enough for me. The circuits around interaction design are often like UX, UI circuits are often quite, I would say, reluctant to go a bit deeper into the, let's say, something I like to call humane technology. Often, if something is human centric, it can mean, we humans are good and bad. We are good and evil to a certain extent, and I'm a bit discontent with the evil sides and the wrongdoings of also interaction designers in the field, making things usable, friendly, ergonomic, efficient, but sometimes not looking into the more complex ethical issues behind technologies that they work for or design for. So I guess I am a kind of interaction critic of interaction design at the same time. But what can I say? I was a nerd of the 90s.
Okay.
Excited about the emergence of new tools, and technologies, internet. And back then, pursuing a career in interaction design was the thing to do for me, because I wanted to be between technology and people, trying to at least prototype certain new types of interaction. And of course, people like Steve Jobs and this great designers who pushed the digital revolution to new horizons. This was a big inspiration. But at the same time, I was also always very much interested in interactive art, in media arts, where more critical, progressive thoughts, even activistic, ideas about technology were discussed. So I'm somewhere between interaction design as applied design practice and interactive art, where you have more of experimental things going on. And I guess this is also makes me maybe slightly different from the common interaction design practice, because I very much like speculative design also, and art, and less applied, let's say, projects.
So, how did you find out about design and design research? And under what circumstances did you decide to pursue a career in this field? You partly answered half of that question, but what was the moment you decided to completely delve deeper into it? You did say that you were an 80s nerd. So does that have something to do with this?
Definitely, it has. But also, when I arrived I lived half of my life in the Netherlands, and I must say that the Netherlands is a designed country. It would not exist without design because it's under the sea level. So the Dutch had to figure out how to, make this country, how to sustain this piece of land. By amazing investments and into infrastructure to prevent the water, to keep the water away. So I must say that being here in this very rich environment of with design thinking involved in almost any public and private activities here. So this is was a very vital and very fruitful environment for me to pursue this career in interaction design and speculative design, design criticism and research. This is a place to be because these types of activities are also quite subsidized here. You can easily receive funding for, let's say, doing non-applied design. So it's quite interesting that it's not so much it's a privilege, obviously, to enjoy this type of environment where you can do that also, let's say, make a living out of that. I'm very
Oh,
honored.
that sounds really,
The
yeah.
position of privilege, it's not the case in many other countries where you need to establish a professional practice that's also legitimized in one way or the other by this sort of economic framework. And here it's different, and we can also in academia and the field of education and design research, we can speculate about the futures of design, normative or non-normative futures, on a daily basis. It's a very but that is a very interesting place to be.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting practice because I don't see that around. I mean, I don't see that happening around me because many people do say that it might be a waste of time. But then this feels like this is the way to go because this is really being sensitive towards a lot of aspects.
Yeah, that's what we understood nowadays, that design research is needed for good design, because the world is very complex, and we don't, for instance, not only have the human-centered perspective, because we need an environment-centered perspective, and we also need technology-centered perspective. This triangle of environment, human, and technology needs to be discussed, and then you deal with so many different bodies of knowledge. I don't remember who said that, but design is too important to leave it only to designers. Like it's we need other disciplines, other bodies of knowledge to discuss design and make design and speculate about design futures from these different perspectives. Therefore, the books behind me, I guess, today designers need to do research all the time and be very curious about different disciplines. And developments in the field of economy, social studies, cultural studies, gender studies, politics, technology, and so on, art, and so on, and so on, and so on.
Next is a slightly more professional question. Do you have any inspirations, people you would like to work with? I was just wondering I was just curious about that. Any specific people works?
Well, I'm recently quite involved into discovering. I like to read, and let's say there's certain authors that I really admire or look up to, and there's been people from very different fields. I've been always reading, like Bruce Sterling or Lev Manovich from, let's say, the more like media theory circuit. Right now I'm more reading anthropologists and Arturo Escobar theory of design for the pluriversal world. There are I struggle with maybe mentioning specific designers or authors that are active in the field. I'm rather following theorists, and this is my main source of inspiration for my research work as well.
So I noticed in one of the videos you had said, we were talking about how certain languages and certain concepts in mathematics weren't always taught in schools, but then eventually that became the curriculum. And when I take this back to you did, I mean, you did take it back to coding. And so I wanted to ask if for all of us who are often intimidated or we believe that we have a natural aversion towards understanding these concepts. And I think you convinced me really well that I need to get into it. So I would like you to actually explain our relationship, just laid bare out our relationship with technology, why we need to delve so deeply into it and understand, reflect, and actually learn about it truly.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is no way out. The digital literacy is key. People like as Douglas Rushkoff said once in this book, program or be programmed, right? So if we get some at least fundamental affinity with code, you know, it's not needed that everybody. It's not needed to become a hardcore, you know, like programmer or understand really everything, but at least to have some fundamentals, to be basically an aware citizen. It's not even for the profession of design in general. I see there's a really the digital revolution did not fully happen yet. There is still so much to do in our, you know, primary schools, secondary schools, and for sure at universities and studies like design. There should be, there should be an emphasis on that, because that's, whether we want it or not, this is what's going on in the world. We are so dependent on technology, and we need to be aware of how technology works and how to work with that technology in order to in order to propose really ethical solutions. So truly liberating people, because there are a lot of there's a lot of manipulation, a lot of shady corners in this industry. So and it's not as difficult as it seems to be. There are many environments for like creative coding. Everybody can start with some few tutorials online, and to
definitely.
Just, you know, to get on hands dirty with the inner workings of the computer, because, you know, like we are with the, you know, with smartphones, we are often sliding on the surface of technology. We are not really looking what's in the black box, but we are just users, consumers. And, you know, user is often a loser. You know, the user can be very passive, in fact. Like the idea of interaction, sure, there are a lot of interactive tools, but is that user fully critical? Is that user fully aware of the inner workings of the system he or she uses, or they use it, right? This is very very important, and that awareness in academia and in design studies, for sure. So I think I call also for reform of design education, where this looking into ethics, and specifically ethics of technology, should be at the center of design processes, thinking processes, and research.
Definitely. Speaking of ethics, this is a very, I think, a lot of people have debated it, and I do want to know your opinion about the relationship between data and empathy. You did bring up the fact that when you need to empathize with someone, you need to have certain information that you may not be currently privy to. So that sort of builds on to that feedback loop where you can empathize with the situation and then solve a problem. But I feel like many designers directly jump into solving problems instead of first identifying the problem. So where is this line between, like, who owns my data and how do I have control over it when I actually share it? And if I don't share it, people can't empathize with me. So how do you negotiate that?
Well, it's a complex question.
Yeah.
Not easy to answer, but I would say, in our human interactions and interactions with data, of course, with the last years, we've been facing a lot of wrongdoing out there, misuse of data, unjustified data collection, and also certain unethical practices around it. So, the trust is broken. Or threatened at least, and that creates a disruption between the designers and also users, I would say. So that's where the participatory design needs to come in. We need a larger engagement of users in whatever is being designed. Public control and transparency is needed, and not practice of monetization, commodification of our interactions, not this hierarchical structures in tech industry. It's really a big problem, which is conserving capitalism as we knew it, turning it into so-called surveillance capitalism, as Shoshana Zuboff rightly described in her book. There will be processes in the future around data which could lead to, I don't know, certain collectivization of Facebook or let's movements that would call for unionizing, or having democratic control over the inner workings of technologies. I do see it coming because awareness is raising. Design has a role in there because only design can make it a little bit more accessible to people to understand what terms of what terms and agreements or terms and conditions they are signing.
This is something that I think is very important to all of us, especially everybody who's attending the open elective and students who are aspiring designers in India. As a person, you have talked about being very sensitive to the local context. So are there certain tendencies that you can bracket, which it comes to your mind when you say Indian context? Is there any way to bracket certain tendencies that might not work very well if scaled up to an international audience?
Yeah, so there are two reflections here. Of course, as a tall white man living in Western Europe, as soon as I engage with design practice or design research in the global South, I'm in a bit of a difficult position, right? So obviously my uttermost need and requirement for that is to work inclusively in a participatory fashion with the local communities, and this is what fascinates me, how I can do it, how to do it well, and again following a certain ethical principles that I believe in. I think regarding a question, there are 2 points of attention. So one is, how upscaling local projects can be a problem. But my concern, from my perspective, is what the global solutions in technology, for instance, in design, what harm they do to the local, So for me, it's a bit hard to think from like Indian context to the rest of the world. I rather think of the world, how that it maybe undermines certain local developments. That's my main sort of struggle or reflection on global tech. But yeah, in my examples, I always like to talk about social apps and solutions like dating apps and things of that kind, which kind of propose some type of a model of how things should work for management, maintenance of relationship between people, and it's so northwestern centric. So yeah, when it comes to global South and the different reality of in India specifically, very different type of environment. Yeah, how to resolve this dissonance, you know, this conflict, yeah, between the sort of Western values or ideologies put into these technologies and respect for tradition and certain local customs. You know, this is something that I think any technology can be scalable from local to global. So global, every technology can have these two dimensions, and obviously we also spread around the world, right? Different nationalities and so forth. So I guess we always think locally and globally at the same time, but the emphasis on local is very needed because we do forget a lot of that in design processes. Technology is somehow in itself a bit insensitive to the local context because you deal with cultural aspects, with of course, ethical aspects, with certain political situation, economic situation. So you can't design in a vacuum, you know, in a limbo, in some kind of space that is unrelated to these factors. And this is what makes NID great, as well as a very interesting institution in India, trying to pursue, of course, its own legacy, you know, in design thinking, in design practice, and design research. Very, very important of a global outreach, local importance, but also global outreach, which fascinates me. And yeah, I think this is for me also a great opportunity to be able to speak to you and connect also through the open electives to establish new type of alliances for the young generation of designers. How exactly the Indian way of thinking, Indian imagination and knowledge, how this can potentially be an inspiration for us here in Europe, for instance. And I do already experience it with my students in the open electives. I'm so delighted to hear how they think, how they process the things they encounter with technology, with design, how they relate to that and try to come up with alternatives to what we usually do over here. So I guess it's it's a process. It's not easy. It's in many places around the world. We need emancipatory design thinking and design processes come from the global south for sure. Big enthusiast of that type of movements. From academic circuits, but also alternative groups, underground groups, hacktivistic groups, progressive thinkers in the global south. We really need you for resolving, correcting certain reality. We all ended up with the global reality of technology that is problematic here and there. So the voice from the south counts very much, or is even the primary that I would like to hear.
Well, this actually raises a very interesting question for me because we talked about internalizing the black box. You said that there's an input and then there's an output and there's the black box, and this is a system that we work with. But often we're taught how to actually perceive through this black box because it is conditioning us. And when you're taught how to interact with a system, you are already handed a platter of what you believe to be its rules and constraints. So when you talk about emancipatory design, or if you're talking about progressive thinkers, you are still working within what you believe to be the rules and constraints. So what is the alternative to it? Because I was reading a paper on something called civilian aided design, but they're just not participants in the design process, but they are actually the end user. So instead of thinking, so what are your thoughts on that?
Yes. So when it comes to the black box theory, and we have different energies as creatives. What often is forgotten in design thinking is the more disruptive, provocative, hacktivistic approach. That's why I sympathize with artists and activists, because they have this energy to disrupt, or criticize. We really very much need it. Design is often very consensual, or very, design often is solutionist, and a bit like considerate about different stakeholders and trying to be balance different voices, and it's good. That's more positive and like very, I would say, considerate approach, and design that I like. But at the same time, when it comes to all these black boxes around it, we need to stay critical and suspicious also about how they work, what they do, and anywhere, if if you work as a designer for a company and you are on some working on a specific element in the design process, always be critical, stay aware, and ask questions about the bigger picture of what you design, of the assignment you are given. So so I don't know if that answers your question, but I like to interact with the black boxes in very different ways. Sometimes I try to reveal the mystery and dismantle. Sometimes I try to break the black box. Sometimes I like to make an alternative black box that does things better or differently. So it really depends what type of project it is and what tools you need. But again, this something between design and art, or activism and actually constructivism, is needed, I would say.
Okay. Well, we do not have time for the last question, so I will just take a question from the audience. The Jashwini Dev asks, what's your view on state and direct manipulation in different platforms and gadgets? State of direct manipulation.
Yes. Well, I think that depends what specific platforms or gadgets we mean. I think every case is different. I wouldn't say that all manipulation is bad. We are when we're watching films which we enjoy so much, we're also being manipulated into a specific story. I mean, manipulation can be it's what everybody does in some way or the other. We also probably try to manipulate each other in human relations. So I think I wouldn't have one judgment on this. Direct, indirect manipulation. Also, there's discrete manipulation, more direct manipulation. I don't really, so maybe I don't really answer the question. I'm a bit ambiguous about it. I just think that, we need to stay critical all the time and aware that we might be manipulated unconsciously or being used for something, as we are when we, I don't know, fill in CAPTCHA texts when logging in somewhere and training some military machines maybe on. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that I don't like, this manipulation that is quite sneaky and makes me very disappointed in also the designers and industries that implement tools that have a double agenda, or maybe even one agenda, but questionable one.
Neha Agnihotri asks, does the personality of the programmer / coder get reflected while designing software, and how it affects?
Yes, I think it can be reflected, of course. I see programming and coding as poetry. It's even how the structure of code looks like. It's not a prose. It's not a novel, written from left to right, or it's going more vertically, and you have these phrases and different moments, and I would say logical statements, conditional statements, and so for me it's poetry. And definitely, if you open a code, you can see the artist, or see the thinker, see the philosopher. And in just the very structure of the code, but also in what the code does and how it does it. So that's where the term creative coding comes in, where you are, let's say, the artistry or even crafts or identity, philosophy comes across stronger than in this applied, engineering type of way of coding, but also within the field of, let's say, applied programming. I guess can express someone's identity in one way or the other. Yeah, but again, a lot of coding today is done collectively. So it's like I'm not sure if we're seeing the person in the end. That's maybe the problem as well, because of these processes are so, again, commodified, that the individual voice often loses, or individual vision, but there are the field of interactive art, or also speculative design and creative coding shows that this is possible. So we need more of that. We need more choices. We need way more options for tools we use. Then we could use platforms that have really an identity, and that we can also relate the identity of a specific platform or solutions to a person and his or her or their vision.
Well, that was actually a very beautiful answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we've actually run out of time, and this always happens, but we would have loved to have longer, more in-depth conversations with you, bring up many questions, and we hope to have you on another session very soon. Thank you for your time.
I'm open to it. Thank you very much for the invitation, and any other further conversation on the so-called humane technology, good technology, good design solution, I'm very much willing to answer questions or engage in a discussion with the community of NID. So looking forward to the next encounter.
I think if anybody has more questions, they can actually get in touch with you.
Sure.
I think you had mentioned that before.
Sure, I'm learning. I'm learning through that a lot as well. So please, it's for me a food thought, which is difficult because of the pandemic. It's a bit more difficult to reach to each other. I mean, to meet, and that's not exactly when we need it. When we need to talk about global and local problems and design and technology, we are on distance to each other, and that's a big problem for me. It disrupts my own research into design futures, normative or non-normative futures. So thank you to NID for giving also us, the lecturers or thinkers from outside of India, this opportunity to engage in collaborative practice with you within education and research. Is really important for us.
Thank you, Pawel.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.